peaceful here, beautiful area, and it's peaceful. But again, everybody's waiting
peaceful up
for
here.
something to happen.
Yeah.
It's that moment of just waiting.
The calm before the storm.
Yeah, a bit of dread, but a bit calmer than it was pre Hassan Nasrallah's speech, I think.
For sure.
But you're waiting, and let's see.
So here we are in our house in the mountains of Lebanon, and we're all waiting for something to happen. Only we don't know what it is that's going to happen.
Karim, as the local, as you always put it,
you're just as local.
Well, in this context, we're all
local now. But Karim, as the local, in quotation marks, of course, what are your thoughts? What are your predictions?
No predictions, but familiar feel as usual. Waiting for the Israelis to attack and to hit. Waiting for some kind of battle. Waiting for some kind of explosion. Waiting for somebody. In this case now, Hezbollah and others to retaliate from this incredible assassinations, a series of assassinations across the region and here. And now we're waiting. And now, as Hassan Nasrallah said, it could happen anytime. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week. Something's going to happen. And then, you wait to see what are the Israelis going to do. And the Americans are moving, we just read now, they're moving yet more battleships into the, close to our coast. And so it's this usual thing of just expecting something big to happen. People are worried, people are anxious. And it's that sense of dread. But at the same time, the sense of, okay, after the Hassan Nasrallah speech, actually, people calmed down a little bit in the sense of, there was a sense of immediate response, because there was a lot of...
No, the worry of an immediate
response versus after the speech, it felt like, okay, it could be today, but it could be next week. So there was a slight release of tension, but in order that, we are continuing. In the meantime, people are doing as we always do here, which is, people are filling gas, people are buying some supplies, people are, waiting for something to happen, and make sure that you're as prepared as possible. For those that can, anyway.
We should say that we're recording August 3rd. It's Saturday. We're up in the mountains in Lebanon right now. And when Karim says waiting for the response, he means, of course, waiting for the response after the Israeli assassinations of a senior Hezbollah leader in Beirut, and also the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, in Tehran. And so waiting for
another bombing that took place in Damascus.
And another bombing that took place in Damascus.
And the U.S. attack in Iraq, where they killed several
and
people
the U.S. attack
day.
on Iraq. And the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, basically said in his speech the day before yesterday that there will be a response. It's not a question of whether there will be a response, but there will be a response. But how and when, of course, will be determined, he said, at a date that only the resistance and the axis of resistance knows. And so, of course, everyone here in Lebanon, where we're recording from, understands perfectly well that any kind of larger war, because, of course, there's a war going on right now. In fact, the day before yesterday, the Israelis yet again massacred more people in South Lebanon, as they have been massacring people in Gaza for over 300 days.
On the border, the Lebanese-Syrian
exactly, on the Lebanese border. And,
no, the Lebanese-Syrian border too. Yeah. They hit the Hidman.
Oh, they also hit in the Hidman.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've been massacring people left, right, and center, consistently trying to provoke. Obviously, Netanyahu came back from the U.S. and he's trying to provoke this wider war.
But that's why, actually, Osama, sorry, that's why we should back up and say the context for right now is in the wake of the Israeli bombing of Beirut, Damascus, and Tehran in one 24 hours.
In the larger context of Netanyahu being in the U.S.
Exactly.
And getting that obscene standing ovation in the Congress.
Ovations.
And his meetings with, Musk and all these horrible billionaire types as well, media people that kind of, are able to spin and shape media narratives. And then he comes, so this happens in the middle of all this, and he comes back extremely emboldened with a half-dead president in the U.S., and a vice president who's trying to do other things and trying to figure things out. And so we were discussing the other day, is the U.S. in this series of attacks, were they absolutely complicit? Did they know what they're doing? Or was this just something where Netanyahu sort of understood that he had support at a certain base, and then the others are kind of absent? They're just not, they don't know what's going on. Not in the big, but sort of in the details. They weren't informed.
I think,
and they pushed it.
I think that Netanyahu came back from the U.S. It's clear from even the call out of the speech that Biden had with, or the conversation that Biden had with Netanyahu.
That was leaked.
That was leaked.
Which I'm not sure.
No,
happened.
You're talking about the phone call?
The official phone call, the official transcript that was released.
No, but you mean the one yesterday or the one after his visit to Washington?
Yesterday, after the...
No, that's different.
That was leaked.
No, the one where he says that we stand with Israel and...
He can say that at
said
any
that.
given moment. He can be saying
but he
that.
said that after Israel had violated yet again massive international norms, they killed all these people, they killed the negotiator they're supposed to be negotiating
But are you
with.
saying that the U.S. cares about the international norms?
No, of course not. But the point is that what's happening, why people here are so afraid, just to put some context, is that everyone understands that in any kind of war, wider war, the U.S. is going to back Israel. Israel can do one thing very well, which is assassinate and bomb and kill on a mass scale, which they've done in Gaza, a genocide for 10 months. And Israel has bombed at will. It's bombed Yemen, it's bombed Syria, it's bombed Iraq, right? It's bombed Lebanon, it's bombed Jordan, it's bombed Egypt, it's bombed all these countries, Tunisia, in our lifetime. And so everyone is quite afraid here, or at least anxious of what's going to happen. Now,
I think a certain set of people are afraid, another are
waiting.
They want, no, but they want the attack. They want some revenge on what happened in Beirut.
Of course.
The attack in Beirut.
Of course.
They feel quite confident that they can take on the Israelis in the sense, and that there's a sense of it's time.
But there's a sense also, isn't there, Karim, that there's a...
It's not just fear, is my point.
No, for sure. Okay, let's restate it. It's not just fear. It's also, but it's expectation. It's anxiety. For sure, there's anxiety. Everybody is anxious. People are nervous because everyone understands the kind of damage that Israel can do and will do to the civilian infrastructure and to civilians across the board, as they did in 2006, as they keep threatening
That's
to do.
their only MO. That's what
sure.
they can. That's their stock and trade.
But that's why people are nervous.
Yeah, I know. Because
why
they
people
can't.
are
They're
nervous.
not capable. They don't know how to go after military targets. All they can do is bomb. And that's their, as we know, their famous
I
Dahi
disagree.
doctrine is mass.
I
mass
disagree. I
destruction.
think they have both. They're doing military things. They have been, as we were discussing the other day, they have some very high tech, high end technologies that are allowing high level assassinations of commanders, of Hezbollah fighters that are doing specific acts. They immediately get targeted, so they have been quite effective and successful at that level.
In wiping out the top cadres.
I mean, it's some of the senior commanders and a lot of the fighters that are on the ground. But what Nasrallah was saying and others were saying is that that's war. That's part of the battle. They're prepared for that kind of thing, and they can inflict. They have been, but they can inflict a lot more damage on the Israelis. So unlike prior to 2006, when that wasn't the case, when it's a purely at most is a kind of defensive posture at most, now Hezbollah has the capacity for offensive as well. So that deterrence has gone to the offense and not just the defense. But we don't know to what extent.
But you were saying, so Karim, I'd like to get your response, and then Sadi as well. You were saying, Karim, earlier that deterrence has been broken. In other words, the Israelis, by hitting the Dahi, the southern suburbs of Beirut, and the Israelis hitting Tehran, they've broken the deterrence. Has been broken.
It's that they've pushed it. And the question is now, if Hezbollah doesn't respond in a way that's considered to be at least the same, then one can talk about a deterrence changing. Right now, you're waiting for the reaction. So the Israelis have pushed beyond the point where, if the Hezbollah does not respond properly, then for them, as far as the Israelis are concerned, say, okay, well, we can do it again. We can keep assassinating in Beirut because there was no proper response. So now we feel like we can do it. And the next time we do, you can't say, you shouldn't do it. We've done it.
And the U.S., by moving all their military assets, as they call it,
that's
around...
deterrence. They're adding to the Israeli deterrence.
Yeah, they're adding to trying to change the rules of the game, basically.
The rules of the game. They're saying if Hezbollah or someone, or the Iranians in this case, attack the Israelis, we're going to be prepared, and we'll be prepared potentially to join a war if it expands dramatically. Okay. Even though they don't want to, but they're prepared to do so.
But that's the thing. It goes back to Netanyahu, and insofar as the Israelis have a strategy, which they may well not have an actual strategy here, but it seems clear to me that part of what they're trying to do is to drag the U.S. into a wider war.
Yes.
In a way, they realize that they're stuck in Gaza, that yes, they've inflicted incalculable harm on people in Gaza and the infrastructure and the schools and the hospitals and people and civilians and everything else, but they're not actually, but in terms of accomplishing their political objective of vanquishing Hamas, they have not accomplished that, nor will they accomplish that. So therefore, being stuck, they can't just stop, because if they stop, it's a defeat in effect. So
but could you see the possibility of that from what Netanyahu was doing in the U.S. was telling them, we don't need a ceasefire. If you let me do a few things, I can defeat them. So killing all these people, creating a certain regional situation, and assassinating Haniya and assassinating a few others. They announced, not coincidentally, that they killed
Daif,
but that they killed them, I think, on July 12th. So a month ago,
in a bombing attack that killed and injured hundreds of other people.
Right, but why didn't they announce that at the time? They didn't say anything of the sort, or at least not in a big way. Now they announced it as part of this series of assassinations that they killed Haniya, the political guy who was negotiating, and the guy who's the military guy on the ground, kind of helping to run things on the ground. We're defeating them here. We're doing a big operation in the middle of Beirut against this very senior commander, a very important commander of Hezbollah, therefore degrading and weakening Hezbollah's capacity. We've hit, so we're showing we can do all this, and that we're going to be able to impose, rather than a ceasefire where we'd have to make concessions. We can do this and then announce that we've won, and sort of so whatever deal happens, we're on top, and we've done it with strength as opposed to through weakness, which is what it would have appeared.
So in other words, I'm
saying that's a possibility.
You're suggesting that this is all to give Israel a face-saving, Netanyahu specifically, a face-saving mechanism to basically end the war in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza.
It's more than face-saving. He can come out and say, I won. He can come and declare, I won.
Okay.
I've killed all the top commanders.
Yeah, but there's one fly in this ointment, which is that if there's a massive response by Iran and Hezbollah, that's what I'm saying. In other words, he could, but he's calculating that there won't be a counter response. That's overwhelming.
But then he wins either way, is what you're saying.
No, I don't know if
I'm not saying who wins.
That's on the second thing. If Netanyahu just wants to continue, so on the one hand, it's the two arguments are either he's done all this to show that he's won, and so therefore they can conclude an agreement.
They can declare victory. Like Bush did in Iraq. Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished in Gaza, and so because just to end that up, that's the one. The other one is to say they're doing this to draw Iran in, Hezbollah in, to draw the Americans in, and to keep the war going, because that serves Netanyahu's personal interest, so he doesn't get thrown into jail domestically and then deals with the international criminal courts and all the other cases that are against him, and all the anger, even domestically, in his own constituency to him. So it's difficult to know. But either way, he's taking a high risk thing because they don't know what the response is going to be from here. But maybe they're calculating that it'll be a symbolic response.
Okay, on that point though, Sadi, on response, we had a guest here yesterday who shall remain unnamed, who basically on this very point of response was essentially saying something to the effect that the technological gap between the Israelis and Hezbollah, which is the most, other than the state of Iran, which is in terms of the local actors here, the most powerful and potent resistance organization in this area. What he said, the technological gap is massive, and in fact has increased exponentially since 2006. And so he said basically it's game over technologically. Israel, he was asserting more or less that Israel has effectively won the technological war insofar as it stays a war without an Israeli invasion of Lebanon.
I think people overestimate Israel's technological prowess, just in general. So, for example, the Israelis pride themselves on technological advancement, on their own technological advancement, and hence they start doing things relying on high-tech, gear or equipment of various kinds that are actually, in fact, tactically, actually just stupid. I'll give you the most obvious example of this is their high-tech, super-duper, Merkava 5 or whatever the latest generation of the Merkava tank is, that has the world's foremost advanced reactive armor and also a system called Trophy that detects incoming missiles and reacts against incoming missiles and so forth, and it fires a counter missile it fires projectiles against incoming missiles. So super high tech. And so as a result of their reliance on high tech, they've broken the cardinal rule of armored warfare, which is that you don't send tanks unaccompanied by infantry. Because if they put their infantry near their tanks with these things firing off shotguns in all directions in response to incoming warheads.
You're talking about Gaza?
Yeah, specifically in Gaza, but this is an example of their high-tech dependence. So as a result, their tanks are being destroyed because the fighters in Gaza can literally walk up to them and put bombs on them, for which their high-tech isn't ready for that kind of calculation.
But this is a ground invasion issue.
No,
we're talking about the assassination.
It's the principle of high-tech. In other words, just in general, Israel's self-congratulatory position on its high tech does not necessarily translate into material advancements in the actual in the world in the field, right?
But it does, because Karim is saying, in the sense it does. Karim is saying and pointing out what we all just saw this last week. They assassinated all these different leaders.
They have a capacity. Yes. So the one place where they remain more advanced is they have aircraft, which the other side doesn't really have, and so they can do incredible bombardments from long range, standoff, etc., in a way that they're, as far as we know, invulnerable to countermeasures. Nobody can shoot down Israeli planes, as far as we know. Maybe there's some weapons that we don't know about. I have no idea, but that's true. That's one technological gap.
And they have the superpower behind them, the U.S.
That's not a technological
what's
gap.
that one?
But
Yeah, okay.
well, the other one is that they are able to do
Assassination?
relatively precise, pinpoint. I mean, of course, in Beirut, they destroyed an entire building and killed and injured, I don't know, 100 people, or something like that, right? But
Yeah.
as far as they're concerned, that's relatively pinpoint compared to when they tried to kill Daif in Gaza, where they killed, as
Or
I
in
said.
2006, yeah.
I mean, so they're not always capable of doing these kinds of things, but there is a capacity for precision strikes.
So-called precision strikes.
So-called, of course, this is all relative to the Israeli, where they don't mind killing hundreds or dozens of people at a time to go after one particular person. But that's something that they have that, as far as we know, the other side doesn't have. So those are the two technological gaps that really exist: aircraft and anti-aircraft defenses, which, as far as we know, Hezbollah doesn't have, and Hamas certainly doesn't have, and this ability to do a relatively long-range relatively pinpoint attack. I don't know that Hezbollah can do that the other way around. I don't know that they can send a missile to go into somebody's bedroom window and kill the people inside the room. I don't know. I mean, maybe they do, but as far as we know, they don't, and that's where there's a gap. But I still reiterate that a technological gap in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean anything. It depends on what you do with the technological gap, and also how your opponent reacts to your high-tech advantage. After all, October 7th happened because the Israelis were they were happy, self-satisfied with their high-tech surveillance of Gaza, and obviously it didn't work.
Karim, what do you think?
No, I mean, I agree. I just think that I think we don't know enough, first of all, what Hezbollah has. We don't know enough about what the Iranians are going to do. And these are the two main actors, I think, in this conflict. The Yemenis have done incredible, but you sort of know what they're doing. We sort of know the capacity. Hezbollah, you never know exactly what they might pull out, because they keep saying, we have things that the Israelis don't know, the enemy doesn't know. Maybe they're bluffing, maybe not. Probably they have some stuff that we are not aware of. It's the first time, a few weeks ago, was the first time, I think, in history, as far as I know, where a resistance force here is able to fire missiles at Israeli planes and force them to turn back. Now, there could be they have 2 of these or 3 of these, and that's the end of it. Or they could have a whole arsenal of this, and that if push comes to shove,
they're holding them in reserve.
They're holding in reserve and waiting. But we don't know. So we don't know that. We don't know what the Iranians are planning to do. There's a lot of backdealing going on with the Iranians. I mean, everybody's coming to the Hezbollah to an extent, but to Iran especially. All the Western things, all the Gulf guys, the Saudis and the Omanis, and the usual, the Emiratis, they're all trying to go and tell them, you have to, let's calm it down, let's not escalate, let's, okay, react, but again, make it symbolic or whatever, this kind of thing. But if that happens, then you have to then question the question of deterrence, because that already happened last time when the Israelis attacked the Iranian territory through the embassy in Syria,
in Damascus.
And then the Iranians did this whole choreographed response, which I think was significant. I think it was much more significant than people gave it credit for. But now if they do the same, then it's going to be, okay, the Israelis get to assassinate, as they did that time and this time. And then every time the Iranian response is going to be perceived, in any case, to be just choreographed and not serious, then why should the Israelis not do it a third time?
But how can the Iranians respond? How can the Iranians respond to Israel or at Israel, since Israel is again massively violating Iranian sovereignty and doing something that almost doesn't happen? You don't go assassinate people like this left, right, and center.
They have.
Yeah, of course they have consistently, but not in Tehran. They haven't done it like this.
A daring attack, as the Guardian put it.
Assassinating a foreign leader.
No, but they've assassinated all sorts of people.
For sure. No, of course they have.
All the top scientists.
But my point, I understand, but my question is, the U.S. is
the
basically...
Americans killed Soleimani. I mean, there's all sorts of...
Yes,
things.
but the point is that the Iranians ultimately are also technologically inferior to the Americans, vastly. And if the Americans are moving all their ships to defend Israel and to intercept, what can the Iranians do? Seriously, what can the Iranians do that's actually going to, in any way, shape, or form, act as a deterrent? Unless, of course, it is economic. Oil, something to do with oil, with the Gulf states. You see what I'm saying? That's where the issues are.
Do they have hypersonic missiles?
Can't be like that. It has to be more direct. That might happen anyway, but it has to be direct. An Israeli attack on Iranian territory
for the second time
through just the theory of
defense. Yeah, but even more than the first time.
Yeah, even more than the first time. Has to be met with an equal response.
What does that mean?
If not, then you're allowing the Israelis to do it again.
But what is an equal response?
That's the problem, Karim. This is where the technological issue becomes a question. Because an equal response is the assassination of some Israeli.
An equal in terms of the weight of how it's considered and perceived. Could be an assassination, but it could be, if it's a huge attack in which, let's say, an Israeli city is hit. Not a missile that goes sort of far away, but is hit, and then Hezbollah fires from there, and the Yemenis fire, and so you get this coordinated attack that the Israeli defense systems can't do it. And you have, if you have Tel Aviv or Haifa, one of these cities that's targeted, you get missiles that actually hit in actual, let's say, open air, not in the city itself. That's dramatic. You don't need an assassination to say that's at least at that level.
But we know what the response of the West. But we know what the response of the West is going to be. It's going to be to condemn immediately in a way they didn't condemn the Israelis.
Condemnation is irrelevant. Will there be then? Will the U.S. attack Iran and obliterate? If that's the case, is that considered? If let's say they hit civilian areas but nobody dies, is that okay? So this is the game of chicken that gets played, and you don't know.
Yeah, but the point is, what we do know is that the Israelis,
security dilemma.
The Israelis are dragging the Americans into this game of chicken. Yes. I don't buy for a moment that the U.S. said, "Yeah, go ahead and do these dramatic things," because they know that they know the attendant risks. They have more to lose in a way than Netanyahu. Netanyahu has basically nothing to lose, at least not personally. Because if this war stops as
I think he's guiding the agenda.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think Blinken said it. I think there is a vacuum in the U.S. leadership.
Yeah, there is.
I think
Blinken is one of the absolute worst and most idiotic Secretary of States the U.S. has ever had. I'm convinced.
And Biden is totally
If you remember Blinken, the first thing he did when this stuff started last October was he went and he tried to kind of prepare for the ethnic cleansing, and he went to Egypt and Saudi and these things, and they made him wait and they gave him lectures. That's how stupid he was.
Yeah.
Ineffective.
And Biden is even more ineffective, if that's possible.
This guy's supposed to be the guy who's going and doing the shuttle diplomacy.
So there is no U.S. So effectively, there is no U.S. leadership. It doesn't exist.
The U.S. leadership became subservient to the Israelis in this case.
Yeah, we go back.
In many cases, we go back to this. No more so than in this case.
Yeah, but what I've argued before, and this is where I think we need to see, is that up until now, as far as I read it, the Americans have given the Israelis absolute carte blanche in the genocide in Gaza.
Do whatever you want, in other words, to the Palestinians.
It doesn't matter.
Kill as many Palestinian children as you want.
To restore a deterrence, as far as they're concerned, if you don't obliterate Hamas, then you've allowed the example that Hamas has done on October 7. You've allowed that to stand.
Correct.
So you need to do that. The killing is incidental. The genocide is incidental.
Not to the Israelis.
No, I'm saying even to the Israelis probably. It's incidental to the destruction of Hamas and I think the rendering of Gaza.
Yeah, that's sad. The civilians are collateral damage.
But I agree.
No, sorry, the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah,
I think it's the other way around. I don't think it's. I think it's for the Americans. I think it may be incidental.
For the Americans, what I'm trying. I don't think Biden is going and saying yes, kill every child in Gaza. I don't think that's it.
No,
it just doesn't matter. In order to achieve the objective, if you kill everybody, it's either come on guys, don't do quite so much, or I don't really care. Those are the responses. The idea is you need to destroy Hamas, otherwise you're allowing a party that attacked and that did something unprecedented and something very, very dangerous in the history of kind of Palestinian liberation wars. You've established something which they can continue to do, and they say, well, we'll do it again.
You mean from an Israeli perspective? From
an Israeli and an American perspective. So that's on the one hand. But what they were doing over since last October until recently was to say, you can do what you want, but even in the West Bank, you have to be careful. That's why they did this fake, this kind of symbolic things of sanctioning this settler and the other settler. The Europeans were allowed to say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that in the West Bank. So there was a bit, and then when it came to Lebanon, it was okay, you do this kind of war like this, but you don't expand it. And it came to the Iranian thing, they were adamant, no war, no regional war. They were adamant about that.
But not anymore.
So what's changed? So what's changed?
I don't know. So we don't know.
What's
so
changed?
now we'll see. Now we'll see in the reactions, and then in the American counter reaction to whatever the Iranians and Hezbollah will do. Has that red line to the Israelis been removed as well, or not?
I mean,
But there are no there are no
They
red
hit
lines.
Tehran, right?
There are no red lines for the
Regionally,
Israelis.
there were red lines.
No, yes, there were. That's what I'm saying. But since they bombed Tehran,
Who do you think told when the Iranians did their response and they attacked for the first time? So symbolically, that was very important. When they attacked and they sent all those missiles and it was broadcast live across the world. Well, it's well known that there was a kind of some backdoor channel negotiations. Say you have to respond, so they did that, and then they told the Israelis, okay, you respond to some kind of thing, So that was all fixed to an extent.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the theater that everybody said it was. I think symbolically it was hugely important for the first ever Iranian attack on the Israelis. On the other hand, counterattack. But the Americans, on the other hand, played a role in making sure that didn't spill to something
Correct,
else.
but
Will they
my
do
point-
this now again? I don't
But
know.
my point is, like, I mean, I think Biden was out to lunch even before, honestly, quite frankly.
But now it's much more so.
You think so?
no, clearly.
I think he
yeah,
was.
of
I think
course.
he's been absent.
No, but
AWOL.
now it's beyond.
But
Yeah,
also
for
maybe
sure.
Netanyahu went and he saw, look, there's nobody here who's going to push back against
Exactly.
him.
I
This
think that's
guy's
what it is.
missing. This guy does what he tells
and
me
pushing
what I
Harris
tell him to do.
and trying to
I'm pushing
push her
Harris,
in a
and
situation.
the U.S. discourse, the official response is always so disgracefully pro-Israel.
Doesn't matter what the Israelis
It's
do.
so
we always back them.
anti-Palestinian, right? It's so anti-Palestinian. It's so
hardwired.
It's exactly. So Netanyahu is basically, what do I have to lose? This is my moment.
That's the thing. This is something we've talked a lot on this podcast. Is the tail and the dog? Who's wagging? Which one is wagging the other? As you know, my position has long been the Israeli tail is wagging the American dog. I think this is yet more evidence of this. America has zero interest in a regional war in the Middle East, especially with oil, and then this is an election season, and so on and so on. This is not in America's interest. It's absolutely not. It never was.
By saying, why is it in that case? What Netanyahu has wanted for more than a decade, not just now, was to draw Iran into a war and get the Americans to respond.
Yeah.
Okay. It hasn't happened because the Americans have stopped that from happening. So therefore, when they want to do something, they're able to get the Israelis to stop something.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But now, but Kenny, my point is
the dog and the
yeah. But what I'm saying now is the tail went to the dog and saw the dog is lifeless, or I can pull strings and I can move the whole dog left and right.
This last week specifically,
maybe this was always there and it's now become clearer than ever.
The tail went to the dog.
The tail went to the dog and it just picked it up and started throwing it around, and the dog was like, well, whatever, that seems to me. That to me is the most obvious explanation. Netanyahu went. He realized these people are going to give me 15 standing ovations. The guy in the White House is totally
many
able.
more than 15.
Whatever.
Yeah.
The guy in the White House is absent. The guy in the State Department basically
is one of them.
Is essentially working with me basically. In effect, the guy in the Pentagon has no clue what's happening anywhere in the world, as far as I can tell. And there's nobody to say no. There's no adult in the room. These people like Sullivan and the other guy, the guy in the White House, who you could tell that there's a kind of arrogance that they have, where they think that they're much smarter than they actually are. That all of that is a recipe for Netanyahu taking advantage of the situation in the U.S. of this vacuum.
No, I think that's clear. But the only thing I'm saying is that I think we all agree on this. I just think we need to wait to see what the U.S. reaction will be. Will they try to calm things down? Now they're sending all their envoys around to try to calm things down from the regional perspective. That suits the Israelis because the Israelis are the ones who did the attack, and so if everything calms down now without any counterattack, they've won that.
But Nasrallah said very clearly, and the leader in Iran also said very clearly that there is going to be a response.
So again,
let's end this.
We need to see what the Americans will tell the Israelis in terms of what their response will be to the Iranian and Hezbollah response.
But that depends on what the response is.
Okay.
Right? In other words, I think you give way too much. Karim, actually, it's an interesting point you're making. You're basically making the point to Sadi that, yes, as much as the tail wags the dog, Nevertheless, Karim has said there's always been a consistent U.S. line, which is that you're not allowed to go beyond Palestine and Lebanon.
Just to stick with the metaphor, the tail is wagging the dog, and the dog's claws are stuck into the ground at a certain point. So the tail only has so much purchase. It still is the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, but Karim's point is that there are regional interests that the U.S. have that ultimately he thinks will trump this particular sort of thing.
Why would they let him?
It's a continuum. In other words, as far as they're concerned, the Hamas and the Palestinians in general, but Hamas specifically, kind of attacked the Israelis. They interpreted it, and again, we go.
Who's they?
The Americans or the American administration. This is why I always come back to Blinken and his that thing when he went to Tel Aviv and said, "I'm here as a Jew."
Yeah.
I always come back to that because it shows it's a continuum. As far as they're concerned, what Hamas did was an attack on them. So
on him.
But on him, and he thinks he represents America, and so therefore it's on America. So it's almost like a direct attack on America.
But that would be, but no. But I think you're also. It really, honestly, whether Blinken was any other.
Serious.
No, in other words, whether Blinken were Catholic or doesn't a Protestant, the U.S. response is always the same. Yeah, look at every Western response. What I mean, look at every single Western.
For example, Kissinger, who was Jewish, never said anything.
It's not about Kissinger.
George Bush Senior was, for all of.
In other words, look at the British response.
Look
at the British response. Look at the French response. Look at the deep-seated racism, but the deep-seated racism and hatred. I think you can't underestimate this. In terms of they always automatically side with Israel whenever Israel is.
Yeah, but the question is, the big question is
Hezbollah.
And they also
they've been restrained in terms of the Israelis attacking Lebanon in terms of expanding. That's clear. So the hatred is there not just for Hamas or Palestinians, but for Lebanese as well, or at least that section of Lebanese. This is the point.
But the question is, when America's own vital interests are brought into are threatened, which they are, if there's an open-ended expansion of this war, that will threaten America's vital interests.
So therefore, when their interest is directly involved, they tell the Israelis no.
Not necessarily.
This comes back to the question.
Did
they say, "Go ahead, bomb Tehran, boys. We don't. We're with you."
So that's why we don't know what that was. The Americans say we had nothing to do with that. Now, do I believe them? Probably not. But I doubt that they were like, yeah, do it.
So if that were the case, if that's the case, that Israel has violated an American red line,
the Americans invested in Haniya and negotiations.
But if the United States is, as you're saying, Karim, from a geopolitical realist reading, saying that they basically don't want this to expand, why are they encouraging Israel, defending Israel, in fact, enabling Israel's impunity?
Why have they lifted their red lines?
Why do they keep lifting the red lines?
Different.
It's not different.
No, and these things you have to look at what they do, not what they say. They have to come out and say, we are going to, if anybody attacks Israel in a serious way, we are going to defend them.
Why?
Because that's
why Israel violated a U.S. red line.
It's what they say. That's why I'm saying. Let's see what they do.
Israel attacked a USS Navy ship.
That's in '67.
Okay, but nevertheless, and the Americans went and covered it up for them.
Yeah. So, but the question is, let's see what they do. This is why I think we're now in this moment of, we're not quite sure because
that's true. I agree, but we're not sure.
What's happened until today, we can say, is that Netanyahu has taken the agenda, and he's the guy in charge now. Now the reaction will determine the agenda, whether he can be pushed back into his little hole in terms of the agenda, or he will continue to be taking the lead in this agenda, dragging the Americans in, dragging the war. The reason Hezbollah and the Iranians till this day did not engage in a war, even Hezbollah hasn't responded quite as much as the Israelis in terms of attacking civilian centers and so, is they understood very well that Netanyahu wants to drag them in the war. So they took a decision that we will not allow ourselves to be dragged into war, even if we're capable. We won't allow ourselves to be, because this is what they want, and this is not what we want. If they do it now, that means you're still playing into Netanyahu's agenda. So how do you
balance those two things?
Yeah.
That's a total catch-22.
So that's exactly what I'm saying. So this is why we don't know. And I don't think anybody knows, because we don't know what the Iranian response is going to be. Now you have leaks. This Barak David guy who keeps leaking, whatever his name is, the guy on Twitter,
Ravid.
keeps on. Ravid. He keeps on leaking Israeli and American intelligence. So, but a lot of disinformation is mixed into that. They keep saying, okay, yeah, we're going to have the Iran, but we're going to make sure it's this. We don't know.
We have no idea.
We don't know. The Iranians have to restore deterrence. Hezbollah has to restore deterrence. That's what we know.
Can they? Is the question. That's what we're going to find out.
Can they? But also, with what means? Because if they can't do a pinprick, relatively speaking, a pinprick thing, in other words, if they have to go for a big barrage to get through Israel's defenses, which of course is supplemented by the U.S. and the Brits and the Jordanians and the Saudis and everybody else who at their service, then I don't know. That's also
so
the
we need to
conundrum.
wait and see.
Yeah.
We don't know. Not enough information for us to make that assessment. By the time this recording comes out, whoever's listening or watching this will be like, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Or
no, we're saying we don't know. We're saying
we don't know.
We don't know. We don't know. Anyway, guys, it's as always, it's great to be with both of you in Lebanon, here up in the mountains, and we'll see you soon.
Peace, a little bit. It's peaceful here. Beautiful area, and it's peaceful. But again, everybody's waiting.
Peaceful up
for
here.
Something to happen.
Yeah.
It's that moment of just waiting.
The calm before the storm.
Yeah, a bit of dread, but a bit calmer than it was pre Hassan Nasrallah's speech, I think.
For sure.
But you're waiting, and let's see.
Okay.
Right. Let the crickets play out so people can get a feel for this place, because it is kind of magical.